My name is Madeline, and at 28, I thought I knew everything about my family. Thanksgiving was always my favorite holiday, when our house filled with laughter, football games, and the aroma of my grandmother's secret recipes. But last year, between the turkey and pumpkin pie, my father uttered 6 words that shattered my reality: "You're not actually my child, Madeline." In that moment, decades of subtle rejection suddenly made sense. What happened next changed our family forever. The truth I spoke across that dinner table wasn't just for me, it was for anyone who's ever felt they weren't enough. If you're watching this from somewhere cozy today, hit that subscribe button. I promise my family drama might make yours seem refreshingly normal in comparison. Let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, I believed we were the picture-perfect American family. My father Richard, now 58, built a successful accounting firm from scratch after graduating from Princeton. My mother Eleanor, 55, gave up her promising career as a pediatric nurse to raise my brother Jason and me. Jason, 32, followed in our father's footsteps, business school, married his college sweetheart Amanda, and produced 2 adorable children who Richard and Eleanor proudly call their grandchildren. Then there was me, the journalist, always asking too many questions, always slightly out of step with the family legacy. I chose state college instead of Ivy League, pursued an unstable career in media, and remained stubbornly single until meeting Nathan 2 years ago. Our Thanksgiving traditions were sacred. Every year followed the same comfortable pattern. Mom would spend 3 days preparing, Dad would select the perfect wine pairings, Jason would arrive with his perfect family, and I would try desperately to be perfect enough to earn my father's approving nod, the one Jason received automatically. "Madeline, journalism is for people who couldn't get into law school," Dad would say with that particular chuckle that suggested he was joking while absolutely meaning every word. "At least pick a respectable publication." When I landed my position at The Atlantic, I thought finally I'd proven myself. Richard's response? "Print media is dying, sweetheart. Should have gone digital." Jason could show up with AC on a report card and receive a supportive talk about trying harder next time. Maya would prompt questions about what happened to the other points. Always the same pattern: Jason belonged naturally, I had to earn my place. The subtle differences in how Richard treated us weren't obvious to outsiders. A hand on Jason's shoulder, but a formal nod to me. Jason's accomplishments announced proudly to dinner guests, mine mentioned as afterthoughts if at all. My mother always tried to compensate, becoming my fiercest defender, my emotional safety net, though I sometimes caught a strange sadness in her eyes when watching Richard and me interact. Last Thanksgiving would be Nathan's first with my family. After dating for 2 years, it felt like time. Nathan, with his easy confidence and warmth, reassured me it would be fine. "They're going to love me," he said, adjusting his tie as we pulled into my parents' driveway in their pristine suburban neighborhood. The fallen leaves had been meticulously raked into bags that lined the curb. Parents always do. "It's not you I'm worried about," I admitted, staring at the imposing colonial home with its perfect symmetry and tasteful holiday wreath. "It's whether I'll ever be enough." Nathan squeezed my hand. "You're more than enough. If they can't see that, it's their loss." I wished I believed him. Straightening my carefully selected outfit, professional enough for Dad's approval but festive enough for Mom's holiday spirit, I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell to my childhood home. The familiar chime sent butterflies swirling through my stomach as I heard my mother's footsteps approaching. "Remember," I whispered to Nathan as the door began to open, "whatever happens, we're leaving right after dessert." Little did I know, we wouldn't make it that far. "Madeline." My mother pulled me into a lavender-scented embrace, her slender arms squeezing with surprising strength. When she finally released me, I noticed her eyes were slightly red-rimmed. "And you must be Nathan. We've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Nathan replied with his trademark smile, offering the bouquet of flowers and bottle of wine we'd brought. "Of course," Mom said, accepting the gifts with a grateful nod. "Richard, look who's here." My father appeared in the foyer, drink already in hand despite it being barely noon. His steel-gray hair was precisely combed, his cashmere sweater perfectly pressed over a collared shirt. The picture of upper-middle-class success. Madeline. He gave me a quick, formal kiss on the cheek, the kind exchanged between distant acquaintances. His eyes, nearly identical to Jason's in their deep blue color, barely met mine before moving to Nathan. And Nathan. Good firm handshake, son. That's important in business. Nathan, to his credit, didn't mention that he was an environmental engineer, not a businessman. Instead, he graciously accepted the backhanded compliment and engaged my father in polite small talk as we moved to the living room. The house smelled of roasting turkey and Mom's famous sage stuffing. Football played on the massive television that dominated one wall, though the volume was muted. Family photos lined the mantel, mostly of Jason and his family, with a token few of me mixed in. Drink? Dad offered, already moving to the bar cart. I've got an 18-year Macallan that's exceptional. Just a small one, thanks, Nathan said. Madeline doesn't drink whiskey, my father stated confidently. She prefers those fruity cocktails. Don't you, dear? I hadn't ordered a fruity cocktail since college. Actually, I'll take the Macallan too, Dad. He raised an eyebrow but poured without comment, handing me a significantly smaller portion than Nathan's. So, Madeline, he began once we were seated, still doing those little articles for that magazine? Dad, I'm a senior correspondent for The Atlantic now, I corrected gently. I just finished an investigative series on pharmaceutical price gouging that's being considered for a Livingston Award. He took a long sip of his drink. Jason just landed the Westfield account. 7 figures. They're flying him to Aspen next month to close the deal. Before I could respond, Nathan jumped in. Madeline's series has been read by over 2 million people. She's making a real difference. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. Well, influence doesn't pay the mortgage, does it? He turned to Nathan. What did you say you do again? As Nathan explained his work designing sustainable water systems, I excused myself to the kitchen. My mother stood at the counter, chopping celery with mechanical precision, a half-empty glass of white wine beside her. Need any help? I offered, washing my hands at the sink. She jumped slightly. Oh. Madeline. Yes, you could finish the cranberry sauce. You always had a knack for getting the spices just right. We worked in companionable silence for a few minutes before I noticed the unusual tension in her shoulders. Mom? Everything okay? Of course, sweetheart. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Just the usual holiday stress. Dad seems more intense than usual. Her knife paused mid-chop. He's been under pressure at work. You know how he gets. She took a large sip of wine. Nathan seems wonderful. Very handsome. And he clearly adores you. He does, I agreed, smiling despite my lingering unease. I think he might be the one. Something flashed across my mother's face, pain? Regret, before her expression smoothed back into her hostess smile. That's wonderful, honey. I'm so happy for you. I was about to press further when I heard my father's voice from his study across the hall, where he must have retreated while I was in the kitchen. We can't keep doing this, Eleanor. His voice was low but intense. It's not fair to any of us. Not today, Richard. My mother's name in his voice, not the usual Ellie he used when in good spirits. We agreed. Every year it gets harder too. They fell silent as I deliberately made noise with the utensils. Seconds later, my father emerged from his study, face composed but eyes stormy. Your mother needs help with dinner, he told me curtly, brushing past without waiting for a response. Before I could process the strange interaction, the doorbell rang, announcing Jason's arrival. From my position in the kitchen, I could hear the dramatic shift in my father's voice. There he is. My boy. The genuine warmth was unmistakable. And Amanda, beautiful as ever. Where are my grandkids? Come to Grandpa. The sounds of happy greetings and children's laughter filtered in. By the time I emerged from the kitchen, my father was on the floor playing with Jason's kids, his earlier coldness completely vanished. "Maddie." Jason caught me in a bear hug. Unlike our father, my brother had always been unreservedly affectionate with me. "You look great. Is the boyfriend here?" I need to perform my brotherly intimidation routine. "Be nice," I warned, but couldn't help smiling. Despite the golden child status that could have driven a wedge between us, Jason had never been anything but kind to me. As everyone settled in, I noticed my mother refilling her wine glass for the third time, her movements becoming slightly less precise. She caught me watching and gave a tight smile before calling everyone to the table. "Dinner's ready, everyone. Richard, carve the turkey, would you?" As we took our places at the formal dining table, Richard at the head, of course, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The beautiful table, laden with traditional dishes and flickering candles, felt like a stage set for a performance about to go terribly off-script. The dining room table gleamed under the chandelier light, a showcase of my mother's meticulous attention to detail. Fine china that only appeared for special occasions. Crystal glasses arranged in perfect symmetry. Name cards in my mother's elegant script. The golden brown turkey centered on a platter passed down through 3 generations. Steam rose from serving dishes of mashed potatoes whipped to perfection, green bean casserole topped with crispy onions, sweet potatoes with miniature marshmallows caramelized on top, and the cranberry sauce I'd helped prepare. "Beautiful as always, Mom," Jason said, settling his napkin on his lap. "Eleanor outdoes herself every year," Dad agreed, his earlier tension seemingly forgotten as he took his position at the head of the table. He raised his wine glass. "Before we eat, our tradition. What are we thankful for this year?" Jason, seated at my father's right hand, went first. "I'm thankful for my amazing wife and children," he began, reaching for Amanda's hand. "For another year of growth at the firm, for Dad's mentorship, and for this family that keeps me grounded." Here, my father responded, eyes suspiciously moist. He cleared his throat. "I couldn't be prouder of the man you've become, son." The raw emotion in his voice made my chest tighten. I couldn't remember the last time, or any time, he'd spoken to me with such unguarded pride. When my turn came, I took a steadying breath. "I'm thankful for finding my voice this year through my work. For the opportunity to tell stories that matter." I glanced at Nathan, who nodded encouragingly. "For Nathan coming into my life. And for family, complicated as it sometimes is." My father's lips tightened at the last part. "Well, that was interesting, Madeline." He turned immediately to my mother. "Ellie?" I felt Nathan's hand squeeze mine under the table as my mother launched into her standard gratitude for health and togetherness, her words slightly slurred. The tension eased somewhat as we began passing dishes, the familiar rhythm of the meal taking over. For a few blessed minutes, the conversation remained light, compliments on the food, Jason's son describing his soccer tournament, Amanda sharing anecdotes from her kindergarten classroom. Then my father turned to Jason. "Tell Madeline about the Westfield account." And so began the Jason show, 20 minutes of my brother detailing his professional triumphs while our father beamed, interjecting with proud commentary. To his credit, Jason tried several times to deflect, asking about my work, but Dad skillfully redirected the conversation back to him. "That's the Davies business sense," Richard said, clapping Jason on the shoulder. "You've got the instinct, just like me at your age." "Madeline has good instincts too," my mother interjected, her words careful as though walking through a minefield. "Her investigative series was nominated for." "Different kind of instincts," my father interrupted. "Not business sense." "Actually," Nathan said, his voice pleasant but firm, "Madeline's series exposed corporate corruption that resulted in policy changes worth millions to consumers." "Sounds like business savvy to me." An awkward silence fell. My father studied Nathan with new appraisal before turning to me. "Your boyfriend fights your battles for you now?" "Richard," my mother warned. "It's fine," I said, though it wasn't. Nathan was just pointing out facts. Actually, I have some news of my own. The series is being expanded into a book. I signed with Penguin Random House last week. For a moment, I saw something like genuine surprise in my father's eyes. A book? Well, that's unexpected. Congratulations, Maddie. Jason exclaimed, raising his glass. That's incredible. It really is, Amanda agreed. I'll buy the first copy. My mother's eyes welled with tears. Oh, honey. I always knew you'd be an author someday. Remember how you used to write those little stories? The genuine reactions from everyone else only highlighted my father's muted response. He took a large swallow of wine. Publishing is a tough business, he finally said. Very competitive. Don't get your hopes up too high. I'm not, I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. The initial offer was 6 figures. Another flicker of surprise, quickly masked. Well. Good for you. Though I still think you could have done well in accounting. You always had a different way of looking at things. Not like the rest of us. The phrasing caught my attention. What do you mean by that, Dad? He shrugged, cutting his turkey with precise movements. Just that you've always been different. Headstrong. Not like Jason or your mother. Is that a bad thing? I pressed, aware of my mother's increasingly anxious expression. More cranberry sauce, anyone, she interjected desperately. No, I want to understand what Dad means, I insisted. How exactly am I different from the rest of the family? Richard's knife scraped against the fine china with a sound that made everyone wince. It's just an observation, Madeline. Why must you always turn everything into an interrogation? This is why you went into journalism, I suppose. Always questioning everything. I'm not questioning everything. I'm asking for clarification on why you've always treated me differently than Jason. That's not true, he said, but his eyes slid away from mine. It is true, I countered, years of built-up frustration finally finding voice. Jason gets automatic approval. I get scrutiny. Jason gets celebration. I get criticism. Why? Maddie, Jason started, looking uncomfortable, I'm sure Dad doesn't mean. Let your sister speak for herself, Richard snapped, then immediately softened his tone. Sorry, son. Not your fault. See? Right there. I pointed out. You apologized to him for snapping but never to me. Why the double standard? The table fell silent. Even the children seemed to sense the tension, their usual fidgeting stilled. Maybe we should take a breath, Nathan suggested quietly. My father's face had grown flushed, whether from wine or anger I couldn't tell. He set down his utensils with deliberate care. You want to know why, Madeline? Really? His voice had that dangerous calm I remembered from childhood confrontations. Maybe because Jason doesn't constantly look for problems where there aren't any. Maybe because Jason understands family loyalty and tradition. Maybe because he cut himself off, draining his wine glass. Because what? I challenged, heart pounding. My mother reached for his arm. Richard, don't. Please. He shook her off, eyes locked with mine across the table. Maybe because he's actually my son. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The dining room seemed to warp around me, my father's face the only clear point in a suddenly blurry world. What did you just say? My voice came from somewhere far away. Across the table, my mother had gone deathly pale, her wine glass suspended halfway to her lips. Jason sat frozen, fork still poised over his plate. Richard's eyes widened slightly, as though he too was shocked by what had escaped his lips. For a second, I glimpsed something like regret before his expression hardened again. Dad? Jason finally broke the silence. What are you talking about? My father's gaze remained fixed on me. It wasn't supposed to come out this way. But it's true? I asked, my voice barely a whisper now. I'm not, you're not. Richard, please, my mother pleaded, tears now streaming openly down her face. Not like this. The room tilted sickeningly. Nathan's hand found mine under the table, anchoring me. Mom? I turned to her, needing desperately to hear her deny it. Instead, she covered her face with trembling hands. I'm so sorry, Madeline, she whispered through her fingers. We should have told you years ago. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. Memories rearranged themselves in my mind, a kaleidoscope of moments suddenly seen through a new lens. My father's persistent emotional distance. The subtle differences in how he treated Jason and me. The strange sadness I sometimes caught in my mother's eyes when she watched us together. All this time. I breathed, unable to complete the thought. Jason had gone pale. Dad, how could you keep this from us? From Madeline? From me? Richard's momentary contrition had vanished, replaced by defensive anger. What would you have had me do, Jason? Announce to the world that your mother had an affair? Destroy our family's reputation? I did what was best for everyone. Best for everyone? I repeated, finding my voice as shock gave way to anger. Or best for you and your pride? I raised you, didn't I? Richard shot back. Gave you a home, an education, opportunities most people would be grateful for. While another man's. He couldn't even finish the sentence, disgust evident in his expression. Richard. My mother's voice cracked like a whip. That's enough. But the dam had broken. Richard leaned forward, decades of resentment pouring out. Do you know what it's like, Eleanor? To raise another man's child? To see her every day and be reminded of your betrayal? So that's it, I said, strange clarity washing over me. That's why nothing I did was ever good enough. Because you never saw me as yours. I tried, Richard said, and for a moment he seemed smaller, older. God knows I tried. But you were always so different. Your personality, your choices, even the way you think. Nothing like the Davies side. I told myself it was coincidence, but deep down, I always knew. My mother finally composed herself enough to speak. Madeline, please understand. It happened before you were born. Richard and I were going through a difficult time. We'd been trying to have a baby for years without success. We'd separated briefly, and I reconnected with someone from my past. David. David, I repeated, testing the name of the man whose blood ran in my veins. My biological father. She nodded, wiping tears. He never knew about you. He died in an accident before I discovered I was pregnant. When Richard and I reconciled, I wasn't sure at first whose child you were. By the time I was certain, Richard had accepted you as his own. We agreed never to speak of it. Accepted me? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call the last 28 years of conditional love? Of constantly moving goalposts? Of subtle rejection? I gave you my name, Richard said stiffly. But never your heart, I countered. Jason, who had been processing in stunned silence, finally erupted. How could you both lie about this for nearly 30 years? This isn't just Madeline's story, it's part of our entire family history. We were protecting you too, Jason, my father argued. You were too young to understand such adult matters. I'm not too young now, Jason shot back. Yet you still kept this secret. Does Amanda know? From her shocked expression, it was clear she didn't. Great, so I've been kept in the dark along with my wife and sister. Nathan, who had remained a supportive presence beside me, finally spoke. Mr. Davies, with all due respect, there's a difference between privacy and deception. This secret has clearly caused tremendous pain for everyone at this table. Richard turned his glare on Nathan. This is a family matter, young man. Nathan is family to me, I said firmly, grateful for his steady presence. My mother reached for my hand across the table. Madeline, I wanted to tell you so many times. When you were 16 and going through that identity phase. When you graduated college. When you turned 25. But Richard insisted. Don't you dare put this all on me, Eleanor, Richard interrupted. You're the one who betrayed our vows. You're the one who brought another man's child into our marriage. A child who is sitting right here, I reminded him, my voice shaking with emotion. As if unable to face me directly, Richard continued addressing my mother. Do you know what people would have said? The scandal it would have caused? I protected this family's reputation. At what cost? I asked, memories flooding back with painful clarity. Do you know what it's like to grow up feeling like you're constantly being measured against an impossible standard? To work twice as hard for half the approval? To sense, deep down, that something isn't right but not know what. Richard's face tightened. I did my duty. Many men would have walked away. Is that what you want, Dad? My gratitude for doing the absolute minimum? For treating me like an obligation instead of a daughter? My voice broke on the last word. Would it have been so impossible to just love me? Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the truth that had shaped my entire life. Richard Davies had never loved me the way a father should love a daughter. He had tolerated me, provided for me, occasionally even been proud of my accomplishments, but always through the lens of someone fulfilling an obligation rather than embracing a child. I stood up from the table, legs unsteady but resolve firm. The scrape of my chair against hardwood seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. Nathan rose beside me, his presence steady and grounding. Madeline, please, my mother begged, reaching toward me across the ruins of our Thanksgiving dinner. Don't leave. Not like this. When? I asked, my voice hoarse. When exactly were you planning to tell me the truth? At Richard's funeral? In your will? Or was I just never supposed to know? My mother's face crumpled. After you graduated college, I wanted to tell you then. I thought you were old enough to understand. But I convinced her not to, Richard interjected, his face flushed. What good would it have done? It would only have hurt you and disrupted the family. Because this is so much better, Jason muttered, still visibly processing his own shock. Finding out during Thanksgiving dinner. Richard turned on him. This wouldn't have happened if your sister hadn't pushed and pushed. She's always been like this, questioning everything, never knowing when to leave well enough alone. Don't blame Madeline for your lies, Dad, Jason said, standing now too. Richard looked genuinely surprised at Jason's defense of me. Son, you have to understand the position I was in. Your mother came back to me pregnant with another man's child. I could have divorced her, ruined her reputation. Instead, I stayed. I provided. I did what a man is supposed to do. A man is supposed to love his children, Jason countered. All of them. And I tried. Richard's control finally shattered completely. Do you have any idea what it's like? Every time I looked at her, I saw the other man. In her eyes, her smile, the way she tilts her head when she's thinking, all him, not me. He jabbed a finger at me. Even your stubbornness, your refusal to follow the path I laid out, that's all him too. Richard, stop it. Eleanor cried. But he continued, decades of resentment pouring out. David Lawrence. The great bohemian photographer. Your mother's first love. So artistic, so free-spirited. He spat the words like curses. She never got over him. And then there you were, a living reminder with his creative temperament, his questioning nature, even his damned crooked smile. The name struck me like lightning. David Lawrence. My biological father had a name, a profession, a history. You knew him? I whispered to my mother. She nodded, tears streaming. We were together in college, before I met Richard. David was studying photography. We reconnected briefly when your father and I separated. Don't call me her father, Richard snapped. The words sliced through me, but Nathan's hand on my shoulder kept me standing. You're right, I said quietly. A father is more than DNA. A father loves unconditionally. You've made it abundantly clear that you never did. Richard's face reddened further. I gave you everything. A beautiful home, private school, college without debt. I even let you keep the family name. Let me? I repeated incredulously. As though it was some enormous favor? You know what you never gave me, Richard? Acceptance. Approval. Love without conditions. How could I? He shouted, mask fully dropped now. Every time you succeeded, I wondered if it was his talent showing through. Every time you challenged me, I heard his voice coming from your mouth. I knew from the moment you were born that you weren't mine. A father knows these things. Jason made a disgusted noise. Stop it, Dad. Just stop. Richard turned to him, suddenly beseeching. You understand, don't you, son? I did what I thought was best. I kept the family together. What family? I asked. The one where half of us were living a lie? Where I spent my entire life trying to earn love that you were never capable of giving me? My mother stood now too, her face ravaged by tears. Madeline, please. I know we handled this all wrong, but I love you. I've always loved you. You're my daughter in every way that matters. Then why didn't you protect me? I asked, my voice breaking. All those years of watching him favor Jason, of seeing him withhold approval no matter what I achieved. You knew why, and you said nothing. She flinched as though I'd struck her. I thought. I hoped he would grow to love you the same way. I convinced myself that telling you would only hurt you more. Well, you were wrong, I said simply. Finding out like this, after 28 years, that's what hurts the most. Richard, seemingly incapable of reading the room, continued his justification. Your mother begged me to take you both back. What was I supposed to do? Abandon my pregnant wife? What would people have said? Always concerned with appearances, I noted bitterly. Heaven forbid anyone discover the great Richard Davies had been cuckolded. His expression darkened. You have no idea the sacrifice I made. Something inside me snapped. All those years of seeking his approval, of blaming myself for his emotional distance, they crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I took a deep breath and stood taller, feeling a strange sense of liberation washing through me. Sacrifice? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Let me tell you about sacrifice, Richard. The dining room fell silent. Even Jason, who had been about to speak, settled back in his chair, eyes wide. Nathan squeezed my hand in silent support. I sacrificed my authentic self trying to become someone you could love, I began, my voice gaining strength with each word. I changed my college major 3 times trying to find something that would make you proud. I dated men you would approve of. I straightened my naturally curly hair for job interviews because you once mentioned it looked more professional that way. Richard opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. No. You've had 28 years to speak. I get my turn now. To my surprise, he closed his mouth, something like uncertainty flickering across his features. Do you know what my earliest memory is? I continued, the words flowing now, unstoppable. I was 4 years old. I'd drawn you a picture, a family portrait. Jason's stick figure got a big smile from you. Mine got a distracted nod before you put it in your briefcase and forgot it. I found it weeks later, crumpled at the bottom, when I was playing office. My mother made a small, pained sound. At every school play, every soccer game, every award ceremony, I looked for you in the audience first. Not to see if you were there, you always showed up, I'll give you that much, but to see if you were actually watching me or just fulfilling an obligation. The difference was always obvious. I took a steadying breath, surprised to find my hands weren't shaking anymore. When I was 12, I overheard you telling Mom that Jason had real potential while I was trying my best. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? To hear her own father rank her as inherently lesser than her sibling? I never said, Richard began. You didn't have to say it explicitly, I interrupted. It was in every comparison, every different standard you applied to us. When Jason brought home a B, it was good effort. When I brought home an A-, it was room for improvement. Jason looked stricken. Maddie, I never realized. It wasn't your fault, I assured him. You were just being yourself. The problem was never you. I turned back to Richard. The problem was a father who couldn't see past biology to the child standing right in front of him, desperate for approval. Richard's face had grown increasingly pale. You're twisting things. I was hard on you because I saw your potential. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. That's a convenient rewrite of history. The truth is, you couldn't love me because every time you looked at me, you saw your own failure, your failure to keep Mom, your failure to be the only man in her life, your failure to produce a biological daughter. I was the living embodiment of all of that, wasn't I? For the first time in my memory, Richard Davies seemed at a loss for words. But here's what you never understood, I continued, feeling strangely calm now. DNA doesn't determine character. It doesn't dictate worthiness. A real father would have known that. My mother was openly sobbing now. Jason had an arm around her shoulders, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I have spent my entire life trying to earn your love, I said, my voice softening slightly. Every achievement, every success, they were all secretly offerings laid at your feet. Look, Dad. See? I'm worthy. I deserve your love. How pathetic is that? How sad that I never realized the problem wasn't that I wasn't trying hard enough. The problem was that you were never capable of giving me what I needed. Richard's expression had grown increasingly uncomfortable. Madeline, you're being overly emotional. This isn't the time or place. When would be the right time, Richard? After another decade of pretending? After I have children of my own who wonder why their grandfather treats them differently from their cousins? That struck home, I saw it in the flinch he couldn't quite suppress. I want you to know something, I said, drawing myself up to my full height. Despite everything, despite the conditional love, the impossible standards, the subtle rejection, I succeeded anyway. I built a career I'm proud of. I found a partner who loves me for exactly who I am. I glanced at Nathan, drawing strength from his steady presence. I created a life full of authentic connections and meaningful work. Not to impress you. Not anymore. The dining room was utterly silent now, the abandoned Thanksgiving dinner growing cold between us. You've spent my entire life making me feel like I had to earn your love, I said, my voice clear and steady. Now I realize you're the one who never earned mine. A real father loves unconditionally. You've just proven you never were my real father, in any way that actually matters. Richard blanched, the words hitting their mark with surgical precision. Madeline, he started, but seemed unable to finish the thought. I'm done, I said simply, turning to Nathan. Let's go. As we turned to leave, I paused at the dining room doorway and looked back at the tableau we were leaving behind, the ruined Thanksgiving dinner, my shocked family, 28 years of pretense finally shattered beyond repair. It should have felt devastating. Instead, I felt something unexpected, freedom. We had barely reached the front door when I heard my mother's hurried footsteps behind us. Madeline, wait, she cried, her voice raw with emotion. Please don't leave like this. I turned to face her, suddenly exhausted. What do you expect me to do, Mom? Stay and pretend nothing's changed? Have pumpkin pie and make small talk? No, of course not. Her hands twisted the fabric of her holiday apron. But we need to talk. There's so much I need to explain. 28 years, I repeated. You had 28 years to explain. Nathan touched my arm gently. I can wait in the car if you want to talk. Part of me wanted to refuse, to walk away and never look back. But the devastation on my mother's face held me in place. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to hurt her more than she was already hurting. Fine, I conceded. Let's talk on the porch. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's fireplace. We settled on the porch swing, the same one where my mother had braided my hair as a child, where she'd consoled me after my first heartbreak, where we'd shared countless confidences over the years. "Tell me about him," I said quietly. "David Lawrence." "My father." Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "He was extraordinary. A brilliant photographer with this incredible eye for beauty in unexpected places. We met in college, I was pre-med, he was fine arts. Complete opposites, but something just clicked between us." "What happened?" "Life happened. I wanted stability, a family. He wanted to travel the world with his camera. We broke up after graduation." She wiped her eyes. "I met Richard 6 months later. He was everything David wasn't, stable, ambitious, from a good family. My parents approved." "But you never forgot David," I prompted. She smiled sadly. "How could I? First loves leave a mark. But I truly loved Richard too, in a different way. We built a good life together, had Jason. Then came the fertility problems. Years of trying for a second child, treatments that didn't work. The stress was unbearable. We separated briefly. And you reconnected with David?" She nodded. "He was passing through town for an exhibition. One night turned into 2 weeks. Then he received an assignment in South America. He left, not knowing I was pregnant. 2 months later, I heard he'd died in a bus accident in the Andes. I absorbed this, trying to picture the man whose DNA I carried. And Richard? We reconciled. I told him I was pregnant, that I wasn't certain whose child it was. He agreed to raise you as his own, regardless." Her hands twisted in her lap. "But when you were born, when he saw you, I think he knew immediately. You had David's eyes, his artist's hands. Why didn't you ever tell me? Even after I was grown?" "At first, we agreed it was better for you not to know. Then as years passed, the lie became harder to undo. I told myself you were happy, thriving. Why disrupt your life with a painful truth?" She reached for my hand. "I was a coward, Madeline. I was afraid of losing you." The front door opened, and Jason stepped onto the porch, his expression troubled. "Mind if I join you?" I nodded, and he settled on the step near our feet. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "All these years, the way Dad treated you. I knew something was off, but I never imagined this." "It wasn't your burden to carry," I assured him. Jason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard that it made my chest ache. "But I benefited from it, didn't I? All that extra attention, the automatic approval, the free pass I always seemed to have. Meanwhile, you were jumping through hoops for the smallest acknowledgement." "Jason, no," my mother interjected. "Don't blame yourself." "I'm not," he said. "I'm placing the blame exactly where it belongs, with you and Dad. But I need Maddie to know I'm on her side. Always have been, always will be." Despite everything, I felt a surge of gratitude for my brother, the one unconditionally positive relationship I'd had within our family. "What about my biological father's family?" I asked, turning back to my mother. "Does he have siblings? Parents? Do I have relatives out there who don't even know I exist?" She nodded slowly. "David had a younger sister, Claire. His parents died before I met him. I don't know if Claire is still in touch with Richard's parents. I haven't spoken to her since the funeral." "So you went to his funeral?" I pressed. "Yes. Richard didn't know. I told him I was visiting a college friend." She looked away. I couldn't bear not saying goodbye. Through the living room window, I could see Richard standing alone, watching us, making no move to join the conversation. Our eyes met briefly before he turned away. "He's been asking me to help him update his will for months now," Jason said suddenly. "I thought it was just typical estate planning. Now I wonder if he was planning to exclude you somehow." The thought stung, despite everything. Legally, can he do that? I always thought children had certain rights to inheritance. He can try, Jason replied grimly. But I won't let him. Whatever comes my way, we split equally. That's a promise. The front door opened again, and Nathan poked his head out. Everything okay out here? It's getting pretty cold. I nodded, grateful for his concern. We're almost done. My mother grabbed my hand with sudden urgency. Madeline, please don't disappear from my life. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging for a chance to make things right. I don't know what right looks like right now, Mom, I admitted. I need time. Of course, she whispered. Whatever you need. Just please don't cut me off completely. Jason stood, brushing off his slacks. I should get back inside. Amanda and the kids are probably wondering what's happening. But Maddie, call me tomorrow? Please? I nodded, and he pulled me into a fierce hug. I love you, sis. DNA changes nothing. As Jason went back inside, Nathan took his place, sitting close enough that his warmth helped ward off the November chill. What do you want to do? He asked simply. I looked at my mother, this woman who had both loved me fiercely and betrayed me fundamentally. At the house that had never quite felt like home. At the window where Richard still stood, watching but separate. I need to go, I said finally. I can't process all this here, with everyone watching. My mother nodded, clearly devastated but not arguing. Will you call me when you're ready to talk more? Yes, I promised, standing up. But I don't know when that will be. As Nathan and I walked to the car, I could feel the weight of the house behind me, all the history, the secrets, the performances of family that had masked the fractured reality beneath. Are you okay? Nathan asked as we pulled away from the curb. I watched my childhood home recede in the side mirror. No, I answered honestly. But I think eventually I will be. 1 year later, I stood in my kitchen arranging flowers while the November sun streamed through the windows. The apartment filled with competing aromas, roasting turkey, Nathan's famous cornbread stuffing, and the apple pie cooling on the rack. Our first time hosting Thanksgiving together, in the home we now shared. So much had changed in a year. The first weeks after that fateful dinner had been the hardest. I'd cycled through grief, rage, confusion, and a profound sense of displacement. Who was I, if not Richard Davies' daughter? What parts of my personality, my talents, my very self came from a man I'd never known? You're still you, Dr. Martinez, my therapist, had reminded me gently during one particularly difficult session. Learning new information about your origins doesn't change the person you've become. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild. First came the research, learning everything I could about David Lawrence. His photography had been exceptional, focused primarily on capturing human dignity in overlooked communities. National Geographic had published his work. Several galleries still maintained collections. I spent hours studying his images, searching for connections, for glimpses of the creativity and perspective I might have inherited. My mother had provided what information she could, old letters, a few photographs, stories from their time together. In one picture, he stood on a beach at sunset, camera in hand, curly hair wild in the ocean breeze. I had his eyes. His smile. His hands. He would have loved you, my mother said during one of our careful, tentative coffee meetings. He had the same curiosity, the same drive to understand people's stories. Why didn't you fight harder to tell me the truth? I'd asked. Her eyes had filled with tears. Because I was afraid. Afraid of Richard's anger, afraid of losing you, afraid of admitting my own mistakes. It was easier to maintain the fiction than face the consequences of honesty. I'll regret that cowardice for the rest of my life. Jason had been my unexpected rock throughout the process. He'd confronted Richard directly, demanding accountability for the decades of unequal treatment. When Richard attempted to modify his will to reduce my inheritance, Jason threatened to contest it with everything he had. Blood means nothing, he told me fiercely over dinner one night. You're my sister. Period. Richard himself remained largely absent from my healing journey, by mutual choice. The few stiff, awkward phone calls we'd shared had done little to bridge the chasm between us. His concept of reconciliation seemed limited to pretending the Thanksgiving revelation had never happened. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my reflections. Nathan emerged from the bedroom, adjusting his tie. "Ready?" he asked, kissing my cheek. I took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." Our guests arrived in quick succession, Jason and Amanda with their children, my mother, bearing additional side dishes despite my assurances that we had plenty, friends who had supported me throughout the turbulent year, and finally, to my surprise, Claire Lawrence, my biological father's sister, my aunt, who I'd connected with 6 months earlier. "This is beautiful, Madeline," Claire said, embracing me warmly. At 62, she had the same crinkly-eyed smile I'd seen in photos of David. "My brother would be so proud of the woman you've become." The gathering flowed naturally into conversation and laughter, glasses clinking, stories shared. So different from the formal, performance-based holidays of my childhood. Here, no one needed to be perfect. Here, love wasn't something to be earned. As Nathan began carving the turkey, the doorbell rang once more. Puzzled, everyone had arrived. I opened it to find Richard standing awkwardly in the hallway, a bottle of wine in one hand and an envelope in the other. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to come," he said, looking older and smaller than I remembered. "Your mother said the invitation was open." For a moment, I considered turning him away. But the past year had taught me something about grace, about the complexity of human relationships, about the possibility of growth even after devastating harm. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "We're just about to eat." The conversation in the living room dimmed as Richard entered. Jason nodded stiffly. My mother looked anxious. Claire's eyebrows rose in recognition. They had met at David's funeral decades ago. "Richard," I said, closing the door behind him, "you remember everyone except Claire Lawrence. David's sister. My aunt." To his credit, Richard extended his hand without hesitation. "It's been a long time, Claire." "Indeed it has," she replied, her expression carefully neutral. As everyone settled around the table, I caught Nathan's questioning glance and nodded reassuringly. "We could do this. I could do this." When the food had been served, I raised my glass. "Before we eat, I'd like to say something." The table fell silent. This past year has taught me that family is both blood and choice. It's about who shows up, who stays, who tells the truth even when it's difficult. I'm grateful to have all of you here today, in different ways and for different reasons. Thank you for being part of my journey. Glasses clinked around the table. As conversation resumed, Richard touched my arm lightly. "Madeline, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" In the relative privacy of the kitchen, he handed me the envelope he'd brought. "This belongs to you. I should have given it to you long ago." Inside was a small, leather-bound journal with worn edges and a faded cover. "David's," Richard explained, not meeting my eyes. "He left it with your mother when he went to South America. She showed it to me once, after you were born. I took it without her knowledge. I told myself I was protecting our family, but the truth is, I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" I asked, turning the journal over in my hands. "Afraid you would prefer him. The romantic artist instead of." He gestured vaguely at himself. "The boring accountant who couldn't even claim to be your biological father." I studied the man who had raised me, the complicated, flawed human being who had caused me both pain and benefit throughout my life. "I won't pretend the past didn't happen," I said carefully. "The way you treated me left scars that may never fully heal." He nodded, accepting this truth. "But I'm not interested in punishment anymore," I continued. "Just growth. If you want to be in my life going forward, it needs to be with honesty and respect. Not obligation. Not appearance. Real connection." I'd like to try, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've been seeing someone, a therapist. Trying to understand why I made the choices I made. It's not easy, looking at yourself honestly after decades of self-deception. No, I agreed. It's not. I don't expect forgiveness, he added. I just hope for the chance to do better. From the dining room came the sound of laughter. Claire was telling a story about David, my mother adding details, everyone engaged in the shared recollection. We should join them, I said, tucking the journal into my pocket for later. Food's getting cold. As we returned to the table, I took in the scene, the unlikely gathering of my complex, imperfect family. The journey was far from over. Trust would take years to rebuild, if it ever fully could. But there was possibility here, in this honest acknowledgement of our shared humanity, our capacity for both harm and healing. Later, as dessert was served, Nathan squeezed my hand under the table. You okay? He whispered. I nodded, feeling the weight of David's journal in my pocket, a tangible connection to the father I'd never known. Around me sat the family I'd always had and the family I was only beginning to discover. The truth had been painful, earth-shattering even, but within that rupture, new growth had become possible. I said, and meant it. I really am. So here's my question for you all, has a family secret ever changed your understanding of yourself or your relationships? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you connected with my story. Remember, healing isn't linear, and it's never too late to rewrite your family narrative with truth at its center. Thank you for being here with me today, and may your own Thanksgivings be filled with authenticity and love, however complicated that might be.